First of all, just don't do what I did. Oh no! Why is my cable disappearing? She's so excited. I was humbled by yarn again.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me for another podcast episode today. If you are new here, like I said, I am Nora, and I'm coming to you from a small farm in Connecticut. I have been knitting for just over a year now, and I have been really enjoying talking through my projects here on YouTube. And basically, I always come back to my umbrella philosophy with knitting that the imperfections are what makes something so perfectly handmade. So if that sounds like an idea that you could get on board with, then definitely please stick around. I have a finished object for you today, as well as 2 whips that I have been working on. So let's go ahead and dive on in. If you were here for last week's podcast, then you would have seen that I had finished that cute little meshy scarf. It was a test knit for Lily Kate France of Lily Kate Makes, and that pattern is now officially available. It is called the Netty scarf, which is so cute. And I had started last week a second one that I am knitting up for my aunt, and it is now finished. Here she is. Oh my gosh, do you see that drape? How delightful is that? Oh, this is beautiful. So this is a scarf shawl pattern. It comes with 2 different sizes within the pattern. There is a small and there is a large. You know what? Let me grab my scarf from last week. Okay, so this is the scarf that I had finished last week. This was the one that I had done for the test knit. This pattern calls for a fingering weight yarn that you then knit up on 4mm needles according to the pattern. And this is the small size, which is just long enough to sort of wrap around my neck once and then cross these over in the back and then tie again in the front. So you get 2 full wraps around your neck with the smaller size in the fingering weight yarn according to the pattern. Now, this second one that I've knit up is pretty clearly not in a fingering weight yarn. This is a yarn that I thrifted. It is a silk merino blend. The brand is Louisa Harding, and it was called Grace or something like that. It claims to be a DK weight yarn, but honestly, I've worked with like worsted weight yarns that are thinner than this was. So I would definitely call this a little bit more of a worsted, which I thought would be interesting just to try and see how that would turn out, because the smaller one with the fingering weight, you can knit the larger size shawl with a single skein of fingering weight yarn. So I kind of just wanted to play around, and I just thought that this color and the fiber makeup was too good to not try out here. So with this, let's call it a worsted weight yarn, I was not able to knit the full large size of the shawl pattern using the 100 grams of yarn that I had. I saved one of the ball bands. So this says Louisa Harding yarn, Grace silk and wool. Suggested needles, US 6, 4mm, and this is a 50-gram ball, which has 110 yards on it. I had 2 of these balls, and so I had about 220 yards of a worsted weight yarn. And with that, I was able to knit somewhere in between the size small and large in the pattern. I also had, this is my leftovers. I would be shocked if there was even a gram of yarn here. And this even includes just the tail that I had cut off, after weaving in my ends. I really cut it close. And I'm so glad. I wanted to use up all of this yarn. So when we spoke last week, I was at the point where I realized I was not going to be able to make it to the full large size. So you cast on in one little point and then you work your way all the way across until you hit this center spine. And so I just kept doing the full pattern repeat of the chart until I was like, that kind of seems like all I'm going to get out of it. I really eyeballed it. And so I cut short the amount of repeats I had done. At that point, you actually work some short rows into this to get that slight little bit of a sort of U shape going on that is done with short rows. So I figured it out how to do that in the increasing side. Then I changed balls of yarn at the center spine. As in the pattern, she instructs that if you want to knit this out of 2 different colors of yarn, that is where you would switch colors. So I figured, for ease of weaving in ends, I'll just change yarn in that center spine. So that was what I did. And then I was humbled by yarn again. I really thought it was going to be easier to figure out the short rows for the decreases than it was for the increases. With the numbers that I was working with, again, the pattern is flawless. It's so good. Highly recommend. But I was working with new numbers. So the short rows that were in the pattern were not lining up with the amount of rows that I had, the amount of stitches that I had, the whole thing. I knit through the entire short row section of this pattern probably about 5 times. And the worst part is I don't know why I didn't learn and just pop in a lifeline while I was going. I got really confident with this one. With this one, every time I got to the end of the pattern repeat, I put in a lifeline so that if I had to rip back, I could easily. But I never had to. So I was like, oh, it'll be so simple to just do this one. Well, I never put in a lifeline. So instead of ripping out the short rows that I had done every time I finished them, I literally tanked back. So I knit through the short rows, unknit through the short rows, knit through the short rows, unknit through the short rows. Then I thought I figured it out and I started moving on to the next part of the pattern. And I realized that I had like one extra stitch. So what I discovered, first of all, just don't do what I did. Just knit this according to the pattern. Lily Kate has done the work for you to know all of the numbers and they're right. So do your best to just follow the small or the large size. But if you're like me and you wanted to just use up some yarn, when it comes to the short rows in the decreasing side, this is only going to make sense if you're knitting something like this. I thought that because I had less stitches on the needles, I should just start at the beginning of the short row chart and just stop when I was like out of stitches to go back and forth on. But what I realized was it's the end of that short row chart that sets you up to get back into the pattern repeat. So instead of starting at the beginning and then cutting off short where I ran out of stitches, I actually counted how many rows of the short rows I had enough stitches to do, and then started at like the middle of the short rows. I counted how many rows I would need of short rows. This is making any sense. And that was where I started. So I did the second half of the short rows instead of the first half. I hope that that makes sense. I'm no expert here, but I was humbled again by my yarn because I really thought that would be so much more simple than it was. And then you realize it's just not. There's so many little factors, which is just even more of a big bravo to designers. So I finished this up with my second little leg of this shawl. So if we fold her in half here, I do almost feel like there might be one additional row somewhere. I think on the second half that I done the decrease side, I think somewhere in there I messed something up and did one extra row. No one would ever know that but me. But yeah, I mean, I could hold it at the center of my chest and all the way into my arm, and then I will put it on for you so that you can see. But in total, from cast on to blocking, working on this just kind of when I was in the mood to, this whole project took a total of 12 days. And that was very much just picking this up when I wanted to. I did prioritize it this week because I have plans to cast on new things. And so I just wanted to make a little space in the whip list. And this was the easiest thing to get off the needles. But I just think it looks so good. And it's such a quick project. This one literally took a couple of days. And then here for size reference. Again, this would be so different if you were actually knitting up the larger size in the fingering weight yarn, but just so that you can kind of see the difference here. There we go. So this really, the orange one is truly, it's more of a true shawl. This was done in a cotton merino blend. And even look at this drape. It's a little bit more just like it all moves as a whole. Whereas this one, the merino silk, is so fluid. You see those little like waves of fabric in there. It just dances. So I think my aunt's going to love this. I'm surprising her with it. She has no idea. And so I'm hoping to get this in the mail for her today. So let me try it on for you. This was why I wore a blazer today. So, like I said, that is the Nettie scarf by Lily Kate France. Took just over a week from cast on to blocking, and it won't be the last one I make. I love it. I want another big one for myself. So that's my finished object for this week. I almost forgot, so I'm going to go ahead and read off my spreadsheet, the stats for the price and the cost for this shawl. Okay, so like I said, I'm just going to read it off of here. This is the Nettie scarf by Lily Kate France. The price of this pattern now is about $6.65. And I already have this in my library from having done the test knit, which also means that I did not pay for the pattern as it was a test knit. The yarn that I used was the Louisa Harding Grace Silk Wool in the colorway 27. And I had that in stash, although I did just purchase it the week before. I did not purchase it specifically to complete this project. This yarn is discontinued. So the closest I could figure for price per skein was just based on a quick look on what they're selling for on Etsy and stuff right now. And that's about $12 per ball. I, however, thrifted this yarn for about 63 cents per ball. And I used 2 balls of this yarn, which means that had I purchased this yarn at the full price of $12 a ball, it would have been about $24 in yarn. However, as I did thrift it, it came out to about $1.26 for the yarn. I gotta add something, I forgot something. There were no additional expenses. And so had I paid for the full price in the yarn, had I purchased the pattern, I would have spent about $30.65 on this project. However, since the pattern was gifted to me for doing the test knit, and because of the fact that I thrifted this yarn for such a great deal, my full project total was $1.26. You can't beat that for a silk wool gift knit. And even had I purchased the pattern at full price, this full project still would have been under $10 for me. So that's very exciting. Now, moving into whips, I do like to go in order of the projects that have been on the needles the longest to the ones that are a little bit newer. So this project has been on the needles for 24 days today, and that is my Folklore cardigan. I am still working on the front panels here. I am working them 2 at a time. This is being knit up in Lion Brand Wool Ease yarn. It's an acrylic wool blend, primarily acrylic, but it's working up just beautifully. And I am knitting this in the size small medium. However, I am off gauge with the intention of knitting this at a smaller size than that even. And I have reduced all of my front and back panels by a total of 4 stitches off of the back and then 2 stitches off of each front panel with a total of 4 stitches off the total front, with the intention of just shrinking this sweater down a little bit more than that. This is a gift knit, so I am doing my best to match the recipient's favorite sweater sizing. And I did not make a ton of progress on this over the past week. You can see my progress keeper right here. So it looks like I've done just about over 3.5 inches on this. And the reason being just because I wanted to get that shawl done for my aunt, like I said, to just get that off the needle so that I'm back down to my 2 whips before I introduce another one. And so this just fell to the wayside a little bit. However, this is now going to be my main priority knit because I do want to wrap this up before Easter, which as of today that I'm filming, Easter is 23 days away. So we are still about 3 weeks out to Easter. I did just kind of get to the point where I am decreasing for the V-neck of this cardigan. It's a V-neck cardigan. Oh, there's always something on my nose when I'm filming. So it's a V-neck cardigan and it's decreasing on these center panels to create that V-neck. And then I sort of have to watch out when I hit the right depth for the armhole so that I can start decreasing for the armhole shaping. So I feel like this has just required a little bit more attention than I was willing to give it this week. And I didn't know how the V-neck was going to decrease. This is a free pattern. So anytime I've done a V-neck, I guess you're just decreasing right at the edge of that neck. However, because you have this beautiful, what I call my unicorn cables, they look like unicorn horns to me, because you have this beautiful cable running up the front, in order to not disrupt it, what actually happens is that you decrease from the other side of that cable. So you have your cable going uninterrupted, and then there's a little bit of the purl stitches that typically border a cable. Then there's a smaller cable, and then the moss stitch section. So actually, you are decreasing until the small cable disappears. And I did not realize that. So I was questioning it. I was like, clearly I'm doing something wrong, but I reread the pattern a couple times, and then I went and looked at project photos. And you see that this little cable actually just disappears into nothing. And I have mixed feelings about it. I appreciate that the larger cable is going up the entirety of that border, but I wish that there was a better way for that small cable to taper off, because really just at some point you can't cable it anymore. And instead you're decreasing those stitches. So then it just turns into this little like 1 stitch vine, and then it's gone entirely. So I haven't decided how I feel about that yet. And eventually I believe that you eat your way through the whole moss section too. So I guess I understand why that has to happen, but I wish that there was maybe a little bit of a neater way to do it. However, Really not the end of the world. I don't think when it's a finished project, you notice it. I mean, clearly I didn't. But while I was knitting it, I was like, "Oh no, why is my cable disappearing?" But I think it's really sweet still. I'm very much enjoying the look of this. I just love a good little creamy cable. So I have made some modifications to this pattern more than just with the sizing. As you can see down here, this is intended to be a fully seamed sweater, and I did a provisional cast on so that once I was done with the front and back panels, I could join those in the round and then just pick up the ribbing on the bottom and knit that, not in the round because it's a cardigan, but back and forth with it all continues so there's no seams in the ribbing, and then do a beautiful Italian tubular bind off on the end. And then I got to thinking about the sleeves because I'm getting close to that point. I'm thinking I might change my mind on this, but right now I'm considering shifting the instructions around from knitting flat to knitting in the round, and I might try and knit the sleeves in the round. I'm not sure yet. I didn't even look. They're probably bottom up, so that might not even be there. I don't know. I don't know yet. I'll have to check the pattern. If they're knit top down, I don't know how it would work because you do have the shaping. Well, I think I'll still knit the sleeves 2 at a time no matter what. If I can cheat it somehow and knit it in the round on the sweater, that would be great. But yeah, it's so quick. It's just a little knit. So not much has been done here. Let me move the progress keeper so that we can measure for next week. And so I guess my goal then for the next week is to wrap up these front panels, which I don't see being an issue. I think we're actually a bit closer than it even appears. And then I guess at that point I might keep going with the sleeves, or I might just give myself a little relief from all the cables and go ahead and seam it together to make sure I'm happy with it. And then I might get started with the button band or the ribbing or something and just see how that goes. Or I might start the sleeves. I don't know. It's kind of fun to just figure it out as I go. So it's a little tangly, it's a little tricky with the 2 balls of yarn, but it's really not bad at all. I definitely recommend if you're going to do a seamed cardigan like this, just knit your fronts at the same time. It's been so simple. So anyway, that is the Folklore cardigan by Lion Brand, free pattern, and it's been on the needles for 24 days. Now, the second and final whip that I have here is my Sand cardigan by Ulin Knitwear, Maria Isayeva. I feel like everyone refers to her as Ulin Knitwear, which is her name on Instagram, but then the pattern says Sand cardigan by Maria Isayeva. So I just go back and forth on the two, but know that that's always the same. When we met last week, I had literally just seamed my front and back panels together then. I am knitting this in Nora Madara and the colorway Sake. And this has been just such a weird, this has just been weird. First of all, this project has been on my needles for 18 days now. I have burnt through 2 skeins of yarn, and this is where I'm at with the 3rd skein. The only modifications I have made so far is that I am knitting this on 4.5 millimeter needles when I believe the pattern calls for 5.5 millimeter needles. And you are intended to start knitting the back panel, then pick up stitches and start the front panels, then pick up stitches in the round for the sleeves. And that is also what bridges the gap between the front and the back of the cardigan. Because the yarn that I'm knitting this with is a little bit more prone to stretching and is a little bit more fragile, I decided instead of picking up my shoulder from the back and knitting down the front, I would actually just cast those front panels on separately, and then they were mattress stitched, seamed to the back, which I think is giving us a little bit extra durability. And then when we spoke last week, I had picked up and just got started, maybe 2 inches into the first sleeve here where you see my progress keeper. So since last week, I knit down an additional 6.5 inches on this sleeve from where the progress keeper was. And then I also went ahead and picked up the second sleeve and knit down to match. So this sleeve, they're both now about 8 inches. And the sleeves in the pattern, there's essentially like 2 different rates of decreasing that happens. So I made it through the sort of first half of that decreasing rate and decided to pause because I wanted to just start making this look like something so that I could try it on and just make sure everything was going well. So I wanted enough of a sleeve that I could try it on. And then, of course, to start knitting in the round, I think I've literally done 1.5 inches underneath the arm here. This yarn, one thing about it is that it just wants to roll up on itself while I'm working. So it makes it tricky to kind of see where I'm at. And then I've never knit something where you would knit the sleeves before any of the body. Like you knit the sleeves before you ever even attach under the arm. That's bizarre to me. And I'm glad I stopped halfway because already these sleeves just keep getting in my way. When I'm flipping this back and forth, I mean, the sleeves are so in my way and there's just not enough space yet under the arms that you can kind of push them away. It is bizarre. But it's it's something new and something different, so it's interesting. I just wish that the sleeves were not in my way while I was going. So I figured we could try this on. I have not tried it on yet with the 2 sleeves sort of on there and it all in the round. I think we'll be good enough to try it on with just the needles on there. Maybe I will just throw on some stitch stoppers. We're just gonna hijack the ones that were on the Folklore and let's go ahead and try this on. It's a weird one. Lost my needle. Beautiful. I feel like I am back in the 5th grade wearing a little bolero jacket to the school dance or something. Could you even imagine? All right. Perfect. I'll sit. I was a little bit nervous because I am knitting the size 5 and I am knitting at a slightly smaller gauge than the pattern calls for, which was my sort of solution to being in between sizes and stuff. But even still, I picked a smaller size than I would have normally with the idea that over time wearing this, it's just inevitably going to stretch out. I also anticipate it stretching out a lot in blocking. And so there's a lot of just sort of trust the process anticipation things going on while I am knitting this. So as I've been eyeballing it, I just have been second guessing it the whole way, especially because you don't have a sweater to try on before you do the sleeves. So you're like, I don't know, this little flap fits over me okay. But I do think that this is fitting pretty much perfectly. It is actually, these armholes are even a little bit deeper than I would have thought. So I'm glad that I definitely chose this size. I do think what I'm going to do is knit another, 3 inches maybe on the body. And then I think I'm going to do a quick block. Reason being, this yarn is not cheap. And this is a floor length not floor length, calm down. It's not a floor length cardigan, but it's a long cardigan. And I don't want it to be massively oversized. I do want something relaxed and oversized. I want something that I can throw on over another shirt. That's the idea here. Isn't the color pretty? But I don't want it to be huge. I don't want to be swimming in it, which is why I'm knitting it at a smaller size than I would typically. So I feel like right now the fit is just about kind of how I want it. I just want it to be a little bit more relaxed than it is right now, which it's pretty stiff. So I think it would be wise to go ahead and just block this and try it on again to confirm that I'm knitting this at the right size. That way, if I'm not confident in the size I'm knitting, it's not too far gone. I can go ahead and rip back and start it in a size smaller, which is just mind-boggling to me because it's definitely, I like my clothes oversized, but this I think really wanted to be huge. And look at the arm. This is after having done some decreases. So really, you don't want this to be too much deeper, or I fear it'll just look like I went out in my robe. So I don't want that. This is a good representation though, because I do very much imagine kind of wearing just jeans and a t-shirt and throwing this on. And I'm adoring the way that it looks. I feel like it's been a while since I even knit a drop shoulder. And I do think that that's my preferred sweater construction on me. So it feels nice to see that again. I'm also pretty pleased with my pickups on the sleeves. They came out a little bit neater than they usually do. But so far, this is going exactly as I had planned, which makes me feel good because I did plan it a little bit. So here's where we're at. It is not even appropriately covering me. So I think that's where I want to get, just so that I can really, I want to try this on and know what it's going to fit like. And at that point, you have to start just considering where you're going to want your pockets. And also I have to finish the sleeves. So I kind of want to just do this back and forth of body to the sleeves so that, I don't know, I don't want to knit the sleeves and then knit more of the body and the whole thing sort of weighs down more. And so then the sleeves are being tugged down more. I do think it's worth blocking it before I even finish the sleeves because I don't want them to be massively oversized. I don't want them to be too short. I want this to be just right, especially considering the price that I've paid for it. So yes, very exciting. This is the sand cardigan. I also think, so I've now seen quite a few people knit this yarn, and I feel like the general description that it gets is this neutral from afar and then super colorful up close. And I feel like that's true. I do feel like from here, when you see it as a whole fabric, there's almost so many colors that it just all mixes together. But I wanted to sort of give you my best description of this overall color from my particular lot of yarn. I feel like it leans very sort of blushy beige. I hope that that makes sense. Where then I've seen some that look way more gray and some that have more of that sort of striation of the gray and the beige. I don't have a ton of gray undertone in mine. I really do think you can see there's just a lot of pink in there. There's a lot of pink going on, and then there are these pops of black, this royal blue, this sort of neon yellow, a little bit of orange, but then even the red leans a little bit more pink. There's this really bright, like, Kelly green in there, but I do feel like mine in particular is leaning just a little bit more like pinky, which I love. I just think it's a great I think this looks terrific. She's so excited. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. Let me take this off and then I'll talk to you. With this sand cardigan really being my sort of like dream knit, pride and joy, dream yarn, I am choosing to not set a deadline for it. I thought I was going to originally, but I realized that would just be sort of ruining the excitement that I have about it. It's a long project. It is a lot of knitting, and it's a gorgeous yarn to be knitting that whole way. So I have truly been reserving knitting on that for just when I'm in the mood to, when I really do need a more simple project. I think once it gets a little further in the body, it will become a little bit more mindless even because of that, just how cumbersome it is right now. Um, but otherwise, it's really just knitting and purling back and forth. So until I hit the pockets. So I'm just choosing to enjoy it when I'm in the mood to and not force anything with it, not push it. So I'm still just so enjoying that. And really it's only been on the needles for 18 days. So it's just been a couple over 2 weeks. And yeah, I'm really enjoying it. So that's where we're at with that. We'll see. Maybe next week I'll have those few extra inches on the body done. And then probably for the week after that is when I will go ahead and block it. So those are the whips that I have at the moment. Now, as of today, Saturday, March 9th, yesterday, Friday, March 8th, Unit Toronto started a knit along for Claudia Quintilla's pattern, the Azucena sweater. And I will also be participating in the knit along. So I'm hoping to get that started basically as soon as I get my hands on the yarn. But I keep forgetting to mention it to you. If you would like to participate or if you would like this pattern in general, you can get 50% off of the pattern using the code aka Nora Azucena. And I will write that here. But also, if you make a project page on Ravelry with the pattern and send that to them at Unit Toronto, then you will get the pattern for free. So I'm really excited about this because this is my year of trying color work and I liked the idea of it being in the yoke for my first try. So then after that, it's just stockinette in the rounds. And I just really love the sort of spring vibes of it all. And then there's like an embellishment. I'm very excited about this. So definitely check out Unit Toronto. They might still have discounts on the kit to knit it, but you'll want to just go check out Unit Toronto's page. But that is the next thing that I plan to cast on, which is why I wanted to get that shawl off the needles so that I'm sort of trying to keep as close to one mindless, one mindful knit, as close as I can to that. But I think it'll feel good to have a mindful knit that's a gift and a mindful knit that's for me. And then one mindless knit that is all around enjoyable from the yarn to the garment in general. So very excited about that. Wanted to make sure that I mentioned it. Hopefully by next week I'll have the yarn and we can play and chat and maybe I will have already cast on. I'm just very excited about it. So those are sort of the plans. And I've spent the past couple of weeks, really deep diving and considering all of my spring knitting plans. So that should be the next sort of secondary video that you see. And yeah, that's what I've got for you. So all of that being said, if you enjoyed this video, I would so appreciate it if you would go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Definitely, please consider subscribing. I do post a weekly podcast video every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to spring forward. Is that this Sunday? Oh boy. So every Saturday morning, 9:30 a.m., I post my knitting podcast. And other than that, I have some videos sprinkled in throughout the week. So if you want to make sure that you're always staying up to date, then definitely you'll want to ring the bell because that will notify you when a video goes up from moi. And all that being said, you guys, a big ol' thanks for watching. I will catch you on the next one. All right, bye.